welcome to the Weekend Rewind. Now, usually on these episodes, I replay an interview where I've hosted the conversation, but today I thought I'd flip it because I wanted to share this episode with Dr. Micah Nohouse and Karen Smith from the podcast Flourishing Unfiltered, where they interviewed me recently. So I'm sharing this for a couple of reasons. One, just to promote their work, and you'll hear their awesome insights and questions, and it's nice to have two co-hosts. I really like the format of their show as well and how they reflect on the conversation afterwards. And the second reason I'm sharing it is because it's really fascinating being a podcast guest because you end up saying things that you have never really thought about. And so maybe even just to encourage you, if you're thinking about sharing more of your ideas, sometimes the easiest way to do that is by being a guest on someone else's podcast, or just getting a friend and maybe you can interview each other for 30 minutes, record that, and just get that knowledge out of your own head when you articulate it in language. It's quite fascinating to see what hits, and a lot of the stories I share in today's episode I've never really shared publicly. So enjoy this one. Let me know what resonated for you, what hits. You can connect to me on all the social platforms or email me hello@leannehughes.com. Thanks so much, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to Flourishing Unfiltered, the podcast for high achievers who seek a professional life that feels as good as it looks.
We talk about the unseen journey of struggles on the path to success that people rarely talk about.
I'm Karen Smith, positive psychology practitioner and leadership coach and consultant.
And I'm Dr. Micah Nohouse, positive psychology and self-leadership speaker and consultant.
Before we begin today, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we're recording. We pay our deepest respects to the elders past, present and emerging.
As we share our stories today, we honour the rich tradition of storytelling that has been passed down through generations.
If you enjoy our podcast, please leave us a review. And with that, let's get started.
Hey, welcome back. I am so excited to introduce to you one of my absolute favorite people, Leanne Hughes. Now, Leanne is a consultant, speaker, and self-confessed thought breeder. For decades, Leanne has helped leaders, teams, and corporations remove boundaries to reach for possibilities and achieve greatness. Through her blend of extraordinary experiences, relentless collaboration, and mastery of group dynamics, she creates environments where business leaders and teams find renewed motivation and passionate purpose. She's the author of the 2-hour workshop Blueprint, host of the First Time Facilitator podcast, and she loves being left-handed. You can discover more of her work at leannehughes.com. Now, Leanne, I am so excited to welcome you to our show. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Even better now that I'm on the podcast microphone with you two. Bright sparks. What a great day. What a great way to kick off my day, just talking to both of you.
Absolutely. It's so fun to host you. I've been looking forward to this for so long. Now, Leanne, I met you about 5 or 6-ish years ago, I think, at a training for a corporate team building tool. And I was about to quit my academic career and move to France. And you had just launched the First Time Facilitator podcast. And I think you were about to quit your corporate job and start your own business. Walk us through what motivated or inspired you to go down that avenue.
I think I felt really sorry for anyone that had to manage me because I'm basically unmanageable. Like even managing myself is difficult. Like now that I think of it, now that I'm my own boss, I'm pretty tough to rein in and stop, new ideas and things like that. I think I've always had a taste of entrepreneurialism. When I had a quarter life crisis, I quit my job at Accenture, a big global company. And, they'd hire really talented people, but they would process the heck out of them. And so there was no originality of thought. And so I ended up joining the most controversial company in Australia called Wicked Campervans, working directly for their founder. And there were no rules. Our corporate strategy, was spray painted in the office. We had insane, really interesting specials and giveaways that would drive word of mouth. And just by working with him, he kind of just showed me that you can do anything. And there are limitless possibilities. But it didn't take me until, that was back in 2008. And you're right, Micah, it was probably about a decade later that I had the experience, built up the confidence to think maybe I give this a go for myself and just launch my own consulting careers. So that's the short story of how it all evolved. But just having a role model like him around was transformative, I think, at the age of 25.
Incredibly powerful. And Leanne, firstly, I just want to say, like, we try and make it a bit of a warm welcome, but you're bringing all the energy to the show here, most definitely today. And I think we'll probably get into that a little bit because, you know, part of the way that you like to present it's very evident. Like, if anyone's seen your work, and there's plenty of it online if you haven't already had a look, very upbeat, and you have a great presence in the space. Was it always like that? Have you always been that confident in the way that you present and facilitate, or is there times where you're like, I don't know, like...
It's funny. It's really funny you asked that question, Karen. I actually was thinking about it just yesterday. I was playing around the topic of, you know, people talk about toxic positivity, and I was thinking around what does it take to create non-toxic positivity. I actually remember when I think it was 7 or 8, and I actually had this realization that not everyone else in the world was smiling as much as I did. I thought smiling was the default, and it was only like I realized, oh my gosh, people don't actually... It's always been the way my mum said when I was a kid, like basically when I was a baby, I was just always smiling. So this isn't something that I've learned or picked up. It's just inherent to who I am. And it's definitely served me well. I think I've gotten away with a few things because of just having a positive, like kind of very trusting type of mindset. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. But yeah, nothing too special about it. Just lucky to have just this soul I was born into, I guess.
Jeez, that is so funny and so interesting because, you know, there's definitely a genetic component to happiness. So how happy we are sort of on average, it's definitely determined by our genes to some extent. And it's interesting because I was also always told by my mum that I was always a happy baby. You could wake me in the middle of the night or whenever, I was always smiling. So that possibly explains why we get along so well.
I think so.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I've loved watching you grow and watching your business grow and for you to evolve. And you never stop. You always keep evolving. I think that's my favorite part about you. When you look at you from the outside, it looks very colorful, very energetic, dynamic, very shiny, very successful. You've published your book. You're doing extremely well with your sales. You work as a speaker, you work as a workshop facilitator, you've got an amazing podcast, you've got all these crazy cool projects on the go. It's very hard to imagine a Leanne that ever has any self-doubt, any, you know, difficult times, experiences, any challenges, ever feels like she's not good enough. Obviously, you know that this is exactly what this podcast is about. We want to hear the real deal. What does it look like behind the curtains for Leanne Hughes? Are there ever moments of doubt?
I think the best person to drag in right now would be my husband, Chris, because he gets to see it all. Of course, like it's really funny when people are always like, "Oh, you're so busy." It's like I'm not, you know. And I played this idea with Gary Vaynerchuk has a videographer that follows him around every day. And I thought if I had that for my business, it would be the most boring piece of content in the world. I think what you see on the outside is like the launch of this and I'm working on this. But if you actually see me, it's usually, you know, just going for a walk and noting things down on my phone, on the couch, sometimes just chilling out. Even last night, like I think I spent a good hour just on TikTok, but I have no guilt around that because it was kind of funny and entertaining. So there's definitely moments, and everything that you see that's born, like created, has come out of frustration somewhere, right? So the podcast started out of a really terrible event. When I was in Canada, my boss sent me there working for a global mining company. The price of the commodities at the time was quite low in 2016, so we could not afford to get external consultants, which worked out well for me because I was just this person internally. They could fly around to do stuff, but it happened because the guy in the workshop just refused to participate. And you could feel the energy drop in that workshop room. And then the next guy just, again, flat out said, I'm not doing this activity. You know, I had no experience in workshops. And here I am, the only female, there's 30 male mining supervisors. I'm jet lagged, feeling full of self-doubt. And even that night I got home and I was like, I don't want to go back into that room again. And so I basically had a choice. It's like, you have to, like, you're sent here for work, like game face on. But I got back to Australia, and like I said, that was born out of the podcast. I rang up every facilitator and I was like, what would you have done? And I thought, oh, this is kind of handy. I've recorded it. So I think a lot of things I create are out of my own needs. So if you see anything that I do, it's because I have to re-engineer the process. And I think if I find this interesting and useful, surely someone else in the world can. So I kind of channel my self-doubt into how can this be valuable to someone else? Because I don't think I'm the only person on this earth that has those challenges.
That's
Very
fascinating. Very fascinating, Leanne, because I think, for a lot of us that, we create our own business, or we're working as a part of a business. Hopefully we're serving a purpose. The service industry's booming quite well, and for good reason, right? Like, there's a need. But you raise a really interesting point around, like, if a camera crew followed you for a day, like, it maybe doesn't look like what everyone thinks it looks like, which is an interesting point. It actually leads me to, and I'm just going to a little off-script question here. One of the things I like to ask in my workshops is, if a Netflix documentary team followed you for a year, what would the title of your documentary be called? You got any ideas about what yours might be called?
I think I've actually had this idea playing around for a couple of weeks. I think it would be called Let's Take This Outside. I like it for two reasons. I like it for the first reason, it's like you're in a bar, you're challenging someone, you want to take it outside. I think what I like to do with people is to challenge whatever they're coming to me with, whether it's like a surface level problem that's not the real problem, or something else. And I like let's take this outside, because that's my preferred natural habitat, is just being outside. Micah knows this. We love like our lunches that are in good location, like just taking it outside the box, outside of the boardrooms, outside of your comfort zone. So I think that would be that's a really great question. I'm going to steal that for my workshop. I think that's really great.
Go for it. And I think that's great too, because I think it helps paint an extra, a clearer picture for our listeners that maybe aren't as across your work and the way that you like to facilitate. And sorry for going off on a tangent there. I'll bring us back in now, because Micah actually had a really great question there around, when were the times of like that self-doubt, and we normally sort of follow up and trying to understand where do you go next from there. But has there been any times in like, stepping out of like your corporate role into doing, work for yourself now, where you've been really challenged and you're like, I don't know if I can hack it. I don't know if I want to keep doing this. I'm surrounded by people that are already doing good work. I'm maybe not doing as good as them. Like, has there been any times that you've been like, I'm not too sure?
Yeah, I think all the time. I would say every day there's even a 30-second moment of that. Of course, I think there's always doubt. I think one of my the ability to just kind of get out of my own head. So this whole get outside of your own head is actually probably really important. So my default, I don't know if this is it's a good behavior for me, but maybe it's like whatever's going on, let's just put some action around it. Just because I feel very uncomfortable in liminal space. Like that, I know I don't do very well in that. I'm sort of waiting for something to happen. I'm waiting for a sign. I'm waiting for an answer. I don't operate well that way. And I think that's a bit of self-awareness. Whereas other people might need that liminal space. My default is just try to take action and just do something to get me out of my own mind. In terms of the business, I didn't really have bold aspirations, to be honest. Like when I quit my job, all I was thinking was, whatever I'm doing internally, let's just do that externally. And what that meant for me my first few years was, I'm happy to deliver someone else's content. I'm happy to be paid a day rate, right? And I got that. It was very lucky with relationships, building up an audience from working internally. The first year out, my favorite author flew me to Paris to run workshops with her, worked all around Asia and India and just it was very lucky. I don't even think I've even been able to beat the first year out of business. Like it hasn't. COVID was a fascinating time, and I was seeing my fellow consultants kind of scramble, and they started offering things for free and dropping their prices, and I felt all this scarcity. And so there was an option there, like, what do I do now? Like, do I find a job? And I kind of just held my ground and just thought about, and again, back to default, the question is there anything of value that I can offer someone else to help them? And as a result, of course, that's what business is all about, solving a problem. So I pivoted my entire business model, and I think in terms of challenges, I would say every day there's self-doubt. My go-to is just create something, put something out there to get over it. And that seems to have served me well. I've never sort of been in a situation where there's been like a pit. I feel like I've been close to the pit, but I've managed to like clamber out before getting to rock bottom.
And And I have a bit of a wondering if it's, you said that you're quite action orientated too. So maybe that's one of those like great strategies that, prevents you from really getting into the pit.
Well, I think the action is interesting for a couple of, now that you raise that, I hadn't thought about it this way. Even if the action doesn't do anything, like it may not get an audience, it may not build profit or anything, it just makes me feel better. And maybe that's the clue, is that at least I feel like I'm doing something. And so, yeah, even if it doesn't, and I do a lot of things in my business that have nothing to do with profit at all. It's just, it fuels me. And I would say 90% of business coaches would be like, stop doing that, Leanne. But it's like, well, that's the reason I have my own business. It's able to make that choice. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got the autonomy, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I had a
wrong. This is what I said. I'm unmanageable. Like,
no. I think that's great, and it's affirming for me.
Yeah. No, I think we can both relate.
Yeah, we joked about that.
We joke about that. Yeah. That's hilarious. And can I just say, because you said earlier your Netflix show would be called Let's Take This Outside, can I add in brackets your own head by taking action? Let's take this outside your own head by taking action. I think that is so you. That is so you. Because, and this is the thing, when I asked the first time, what does it look like? Are there ever moments of self-doubt and so forth? Instantly you hear, sure. You say, of course, they are there almost every single day. But straight away you take action on that and you get yourself out of that. And I'm almost inclined to say, but I want to hear about the struggle. Where are the emotions? Show me that Leanne also is in the emotional pit.
I was trying to, because when you sent me this question, I was trying to connect with it. I was trying to go deep with it and be vulnerable, honestly. And I'm like, I've got nothing. I kind of joke about it. Like, I did this event with Michael Bungay Stania, and I kind of, the whole thing around that was, I'm shallow. Like, I'm actually pretty surface level and shallow, and not in a bad way, in a way that enables me to do stuff. Yeah. I'm lucky though. Like, let's just put the environmental context around this. My husband is fully employed. He loves working. Like, there's, for me, the security in terms of risk, there's no risk really in terms of the business side of things. Like, I feel like there's always going to be a safety net. And I think that's a really important caveat for business owners, is having that sort of nest egg. But I also feel like, Micah, I know you're right. Like, back to what you were saying, I don't want to take this off topic, because I'm with you. I was like, Leanne, when did you cry? When did you? And like, if I went back through my journals, there's probably moments where I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Yeah. I feel lost. But it's not in that. I know. Yeah. I wish I could.
You're not a drama queen.
Just such a shallow, fickle person.
That's such a terrible way of putting such a beautiful quality.
Yeah.
Thank you for your honesty.
I would absolutely say it's actually not a bad quality at all. But I do want to press you on it a little bit though, Leanne. Like, you say that we're action orientated, which I love, but what does that tangibly look like? Let's just say, you've hit a roadblock with your business, whether, the content's not landing as well anymore, or you can no longer offer a certain offering. Like, what does it look like? What does it tangibly look like for our listeners to really tap into your mindset?
Yeah.
Okay, and maybe get a lesson out of this.
Yeah, maybe an example would be, so this actually happened where I'm like, okay, and I'm still in this midst of, am I the facilitator's facilitator? I think I'm more than that. I'm repositioning. It's hard to leave that because it's served me so well. That sort of Marshall Goldsmith, what got you here won't get you there. And the S-curve theory of jumping the success curve before you kind of go down. You got to make that leap. And so I think it was the beginning of last year, I was feeling, again, stuck. Actually, ChatGPT roasted me the other day, and it said, it just told me how often I need to create frameworks and stuff like that. So I actually went out and took myself out to a cafe, because again, this is my go-to tangible strategy. Get outside of my environment. I just got a coffee, I had a journal, and I was just thinking, if I was writing an invitation to some type of offer, what would it be? And I just described my perfect day, what I enjoy doing, which involves, as Micah can attest to, like sparkling wine, champagne, some Prosecco, Post-it notes, ideas, great location. I just wrote down my favorite, if I could pick an ideal work day, that would be it. And that became an offer that I put out to my email newsletter like an hour later, and I just called it the Red Carpet Experience. And someone from New Zealand booked it that day, and she flew over, a month later for that. It wasn't even about anyone booking it, to be honest. It was more about just putting a stake in the ground. And I think when we feel lost, that is a dangerous time. Like when you feel like you're not gaining momentum, it can turn very quickly and you start losing confidence in yourself. This strategy I kind of call it constructively delusional. It's kind of bold to just put, when you're in your weakest point where you think nothing's working, to put out something that's quite ambitious. But that's what I did. And just putting out that offer then signals to everyone else, because I think people buy us because they want something of what you're offering, like if that's like your boldness, your confidence, whatever that is. So you've got to demonstrate that in the way that you work. And so that was a moment, very tangible, just writing, no computer, from the heart, as deep as I could go.
That's amazing. And can I just add to that, because sometimes we talk about being paid for being rather than doing. So I feel like that's kind of what you alluded to before. So it sounds like maybe part of the lesson here is to figure out what companies might pay you for in terms of the being rather than the doing.
Exactly.
Who are you, and how can you package that into an offer?
And that's if you're market. So this is the hard thing around marketing that, though, right? Because it's easy to market something that you do. What the results are. If your market, that's like a leadership result. If you're marketing like, this is the way I am, I mean, first of all, it feels very self-grandizing, doesn't it? Like it, and you're almost like, how dare I do this? And then it's also the messaging around it. And that's something that I've been working on at the moment with my rebranding. It's got me to a certain level, but it's like, you get to a point where it's like, okay, you should talk to Leanne, she's great. That's not a very compelling way to market yourself. So you've got to be also very comfortable in ambiguity if you go that route. And my mantra is that clarity is overrated. So yeah.
Incredibly fascinating. And I must admit, there's a couple of things that you've mentioned here that have been quite affirming for me during this conversation, and just in the way that I work and operate. But
what are those, Karen?
That might come out in the post show. Just okay. You've mentioned some really lovely points, Leanne, around I think you mentioned earlier before that sometimes you might put things out for free, but it's sort of like, it's like why you do that. And I think it's great because it sort of helps people understand who you are and what you're passionate about. And Michael and I have had this conversation recently because I'm working on a few things myself that I'm going to put out for free. But I also had a conversation with somebody else the other day, and they're like, no, just sell it. And I was like, oh no, but it's like kind of my moral purpose that I think that people should have access to this part of it for free, and if they want to extend, well, we can chat thereafter. So I just want to highlight that was very affirming for me in you saying
Excellent.
that. So thank you.
I mean, I talk about, so that conversation you just shared there, I talk about there's return on investment and then there's return on luck, right? And I think a lot of the stuff that I put out just to test, it's really about testing the market and just seeing what evolves from there. But it's about getting your own momentum as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. I have a question around like what sort of influences and inspires you to keep doing the work, because I'm sure that you've probably... Well, I know that you would have worked with some incredible people in your time, whether it be previously in your corporate role or now working for yourself. Has there been anyone along your journey that you've found really inspiring, or has maybe like shifted your thinking in the way that you lead and the way that you operate?
I don't know if Micah would be able to say, like, Alan Weiss would be the guy. I mean, I've got a few influences. Jenny Blake, very early on, she created the Google coaching program, and it was her first book, Pivot, that really got me thinking around like a strengths-based approach to my own work. Alan Weiss, though, I've got to say, hands down, he was like a guest on my podcast. And I remember after that show, he just, that emoji with your mind blown. It was like that. I don't know. I feel like in the interview when I watch it again, you can see me. I'm stunned. I'm absolutely stunned. Like he.
I want to watch it just to see you stunned. I'm not sure I've seen you stunned before.
Yeah, I would say.
Other than when we went into the photo booth together.
That photo has never been released.
Cut.
So Alan Weiss. I mean, he said. He's written 60 books, author of $1 Million Consulting. It's funny how my inspiration lies with him, because there's basically, if you looked at us together, there's nothing we have in common. But he just speaks the truth, and he's unapologetic. He's fearless. He's built everything. He's just all about just IP, just getting things out there, living a really great life. He's unashamed to say he's got like 5 exotic cars. Like, he's just, everything about him I admire. And just, I've been working with him ever since that podcast. I decided to work with him. I caught up with him in Vegas this year. We've been in a mastermind in Hawaii. I even brought him to Brisbane. I'm just so lucky that one of the most, he calls himself the rock star of consulting. And yeah, now we're doing a live stream every couple of weeks, but he's been the biggest influence on my career, as well as probably John Webb, the owner of Wicked Campers, back when I was 25. Again, and I think the reason both of those two men stand out is because of their fearlessness and then just kind of live outside of what society tells them is appropriate.
Lovely. That was going to be my follow-up question. What is it about these two men that really makes you tick, gets you excited? And yeah, thank you.
And you just mentioned your lives with Ellen Weiss too on LinkedIn. Do you want to say a little bit more about that so people can find that?
Yeah, well, it's quite funny. So I've got an Aura ring now. We do this live stream called Talk the Walk every 2 weeks, because one of his favorite lines is, if you don't blow your own horn, there is no music. So you got to talk the walk as well. But I'm mentioning my Aura ring because I watch these live streams back that I do with him, and I look pretty calm and collected on those. But my Aura ring tells me otherwise. It's got me in the stressed out zone the whole time that we're in conversation. So we just talk about different things. Our live stream the other day was on how to find your purpose, how to write, so you want to become an author, just sort of topics that relate to consultants like us. Yeah.
And obviously we'll link to your LinkedIn as well, and so people can find you and follow those lives as well, because they're fascinating. And it's interesting that you mentioned the Aura ring and that apparently you're in a stress zone, because stress is an interesting thing, isn't it? There's eustress, there's distress. And I just wonder, and I saw you posting about this on Instagram, I instantly wondered whether you're just optimally activated.
I think so. There's an energized and there's like stress. I think you're right around it being optimally activated. And I think you would both know, running workshops, your senses are heightened more so than ever. You're detecting what's going on around the room, and that takes like a physiological response to be able to do that.
Exactly. Leanne, this has been so fascinating. Maybe slowly coming to the end of the conversation. After everything we've just spoken about, what is some advice that you might want to give to other solopreneurs like yourselves, or entrepreneurs, coaches, new leaders who might feel stuck every now and then and not know where to take it from there?
Oh, if they're stuck, I would say, when I spoke about my strategies for getting stuck, but I think the biggest thing I kind of rely on when I am stuck is I've got so much input that's coming in. So when I'm stuck, I tend to read I need to read another book, I need to listen to another podcast, as if those things will help me out of it. And I think rather than listening and consuming, just start creating. So put that stuff away, go walking without your AirPods. Like, just listen to yourself, journal, create, put things out there. I think, again, that's another way of getting out of that stuckness. So yeah, I notice a trend sometimes when I'm always searching. Was it Sigmund Freud that said, no, it was Jung. He said, those who look outside dream, those who look inside awaken. And I just think that's really powerful. Like, stop looking externally for validation or answers, and just look from within.
That's beautiful, and I think that probably speaks to some of that self-doubt and like having a bit of faith and confidence in yourself. And I know that like my business, the little mantra is helping you unlock your potential, right? Because I think a lot of people have it within, they just don't realize. And yeah, taking a moment to pause and not try and find externally, am I doing it right? Like, maybe I am. I just need to take a little moment here.
Yeah, and who's to say the external people are right as well? I mean, I think we put a lot of people on a pedestal, and I don't know if that's kind of dangerous sometimes when we're trying to build a business. Yeah. Yeah.
And I always say to my clients, I'm always like, well, I can give you something to read, I can give you something to listen to, but I don't want you to take it as gospel. Like, you should be stealing the best bits of it and then contextualizing it, because your context is so much different to what they're talking about. So it's a nice little reminder, I think.
Yeah, I love that. That's top advice.
Yeah. Well, it stemmed from your advice, Leanne, so I can't take all the credit. Leanne, this has been such a lovely conversation. You offer so much to your clients sit through your consulting work, and you bring such a lovely energy and aura to your work, but also to the show here today. Have you got anything exciting on the horizon, anything that's happening in the future that you'd like to have our listeners know a little bit about?
Probably two things are exciting. So one is I'm partnering with Clifford Morgan. We're doing corporate box coaching. So I love sport. I love luxury experiences, and I love learning. So we're just getting a corporate box, and we're running some leadership development around that. And then I'm hosting a red carpet camp out with Steve DeMedio. So 2 nights, property in just west of Brisbane. And what's the tagline? Indulge, inspire, invent. So those are a couple of things that are happening. Everything else is on leannehughes.com. Brand new website coming out in a couple of weeks, which is exciting.
I know, I'm so excited for you, and your speaker reel looks amazing already too. I know it's not quite finished yet. So excited to link to your website and your socials, because it's such a joy following you online, but also obviously in person. You never disappoint. Such a big fan, both of your work, but also of you personally, Leanne. It's been such a joy hosting you on the show. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for your just to be invited on this show, and the message that you're sharing, I think, is so important in 2024, 2025 and beyond. So well done to you both. Sending you virtual high fives. We've had some great people on your show. Congrats on what you've built. It's, podcast creation, it's relentless. So well done.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Leanne, and all the best with your ventures as well.
Thank you.
All right, there we go, Michael. Another super insightful episode. I mean, I just love Leanne's energy. She's got a real, you just feel it, can't you? You can just imagine what it must feel like being a part of her workshops.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And not just part of her workshops, part of her life. Just any meeting with Leanne, doesn't matter whether in a professional or in a private, personal context, is always high energy, good vibes, good, deep conversations, but always in a constructive way. So I absolutely loved having her on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's that notion of real authenticity in the way that she shows up as well. And I know that you 100%. Know her quite well. Got a good friendship there, but an amazing guest to have on the show. Any big takeaways for you that really stood out?
I loved a few things, to be honest, that Leanne's mentioned. So, for example, she dropped a quote by Carl Jung, right? The quote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And she also mentioned a couple of times how crucial it is to find your own voice, to really look inside, to be authentic, and not just rely on that external validation. Even though I think when we run our own business, we tend to sometimes do that and follow those external rules, and always going by, the data and the stats and seeing what works. And I think I really like that she goes a little bit against that.
Yeah.
So I love that. And I think they go hand in hand. And the reason I love that is because we know just how important introspection is, and self-knowledge is, and self-awareness is, in order to make sense of the world, in order to create meaning in our lives, and in order to be deeply happy, that eudaimonic type of happiness. So I absolutely latched onto what she said there.
Oh, I love this, but I'm gonna pause you right there. So you spoke about eudaimonic happiness. Now, so I guess sometimes we probably make a bit of an assumption that our listeners know what the words are that we're throwing around sometimes, but this is an important one to get right, because we probably get to refer to this quite a lot throughout this season, and we probably have previously without really explicitly highlighting what it is. Are you happy to give maybe explain it to me like I'm 5 version?
Absolutely. And I actually love that you question me on this, because we always talk about happiness, right? And I think we really have a big flaw with the word happiness in society, because we talk about happiness and we think we all talk about the same thing, but often we mean completely different things when we talk about it. So one is hedonic happiness, and that is really that momentary feeling of pleasure or joy. So think about when you have a really nice meal, maybe a meal with a group of friends, or when you just purchased a new pair of sneakers like I did on the weekend, right?
Yes.
I purchased 3, but let's forget about that. So that is hedonic happiness. The other type of happiness is eudaimonic happiness, and that is that deeper feeling of being completely fulfilled, to feel like your life makes sense and is meaningful. That feeling of growing as a person and being able to accomplish goals and master new skills. So that's a much deeper level of happiness called eudaimonic happiness. And as you can imagine, sometimes in order to be eudaimonically happy, we actually have to sacrifice hedonic happiness. So if you're working towards a larger goal that might require a lot of time and energy investment, for example, studying for a degree so that we can pursue a career that becomes meaningful to us, sometimes we might have to say no to having that dinner with friends or going to that party. So, but what's important to understand is also that we actually need both in life. Both types of happiness are absolutely important for our well-being.
That's a really good point, and I wonder if we can further contextualize this for our listeners. Could you give an example that might exist in your own life of where you've experienced a bit of hedonic and eudaimonic happiness?
Ooh, I think in my career, I have this all the time. So, for example, think I live my purpose through... Well, one of the things I do in my career is positive psychology coaching or self-leadership coaching. And sometimes when it's a deeply meaningful and a positive and a good vibe kind of coaching session, I have absolutely both. I feel so fulfilled by helping my clients transform on their journey. And at the same time, we share such a beautiful moment together. So I guess that would be an example.
Yeah, excellent. I love that. And thank you for breaking that down so clearly as well.
Absolutely. And I should probably add or tie this back to Leanne's comment, because we can't achieve any form of eudaimonic happiness if we have absolutely no idea who we are, because we need to understand what our values are. We need to understand what gives our life meaning. And that is not the same as for everybody else, right? We need to understand what goals might feel meaningful to us that we might work towards and so forth. So absolutely agree with Leanne there that introspection is so crucially important.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think about that too. Put a post out on social media, it might not land as well as you'd hoped, and we can get really caught up in that and go, why don't people like it? And I think sometimes it's nice to just stop and go, maybe I'm doing some good stuff, and that's okay. I'll just keep chipping away at the good work that I'm doing. I know that's often a statement that I leave my coaching clients with. It's like, keep doing the good, keep fighting the good fight. Like, you're doing some amazing work, even though we don't always see the fruits of the labour now.
That is so true.
Yeah, so that's a really good one, and I love that you brought that point up as well. Just acknowledging too that happiness looks different for different people. So it's one of those things that's not always great to compare ourselves to other people's versions of happiness as well.
Oh. Yeah, never a good idea.
Yeah, I think we could talk about that forever and a day. Anything else that you got from that chat with Leanne?
I have a couple of other things that also stood out for me. So one is, I love when you asked her about a Netflix show, what her Netflix show would be titled, or documentary or something. And she said, let's take this outside. And then and throughout the conversation, we added the bits of outside of our heads by taking action, right? Yeah. And I love that. And Leanne is so much about taking action and just never ruminating anything. And I think that is so important and so aligns with what research shows as well, that when we tend to ruminate, that's usually never a good idea, and how important it is to break that rumination cycle.
Yeah, I love that one too, and breaking free from the space that we're in. And I know that we spoke briefly about this straight after the show. We're like, oh gosh, yeah, how good is it to, go and work in a different space, or go and have coffee in a cafe and try and chip away at some solid work? Or sometimes I'll do a coaching call, literally as a call, as I'm walking out in the bush, and I'm encouraging them to do the same, right? Let's get away from the office. It's let's detach a little bit from that so that we're not caught up with all of the thoughts, feelings and emotions that sit there, and let's free up the mind a little.
Oh, and how good is it to get outside? I mean, she specifically said, we don't have to get outside in order to break that rumination cycle, that cycle of constantly overthinking and thinking more and thinking through this problem we might be experiencing where we feel stuck with something. But we just know so well that overthinking in that way, we don't usually arrive at any solutions, right? How often have you been ruminating, especially when we wake up at 3 a.m., right? And we go through that to-do list, or we replay a scenario that happened in the office the day before or something like that, and we go through that over and over again, and somehow we are under the impression that by doing so, we come to a bit of a conclusion or a solution or something like that. We don't ever do that. Ruminating is never constructive. In fact, research shows that rumination is linked to depression, anxiety, and so forth. So just really not a good idea. And just shocking the system by either taking the body outside, doing something completely different, biting into a slice of lemon, putting on your favorite music or whatever is such a good way of breaking that rumination cycle.
I love that you finished that section with that, because I was about to ask you got any practical tips there, and you just threw a couple of them in the mix straight away. So thank you. And I've come to the conclusion too myself that, when I wake up in the middle of the night and I've got something on my mind, or I'm trying to go through that to-do list, I've recently come to the conclusion that no good thinking is happening at that time in the morning. So just park it, and hopefully, it's taken some time. I'm not saying this is easy by any means, but, just park it and come back to that with a fresh set of eyes. I'm not solving this at 2 a.m. and nobody's going to listen to me anyway. Not at that time.
I know. I 100% agree. And it's one of the best skills you can learn, to park it, to recognize that when you're ruminating in the middle of the night, park it, get back to sleep. The next day, you're so much better equipped to deal with it. Yeah.
And the mind just needs to be a bit refreshed and actually have a chance to recharge the batteries there. Now, you said you had a couple of things left. Have you got anything else?
Well, the last thing I was going to highlight was she spoke about being constructively delusional. Did you like that?
Yes. I wrote that down as well. I don't know. What do you think? What was your interpretation there?
And I was thinking the same thing. I wonder whether everybody just interpreted that in their own way. And here we are having a chat about completely different things. I'll tell you what I thought she meant.
Yeah.
So I thought she meant basically having a mindset where you temporarily maybe suspend any disbeliefs you have about your abilities or outcomes. So meaning that by being constructively delusional, you ignore any fears you have about not being good enough right now, and that then enabling you to take bolder actions or positive actions that you might otherwise avoid. What did you think she meant? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I was probably thinking the same train of thought, and I think I've mentioned it on the show before. It's a beautiful quote, and I don't know if he originally said it, but I've seen it. Like Hormozy said, fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. Right, so it looks massive and it's expansive, but it's not that bad.
That is so true.
I'm sure someone's going to pull me up and say he wasn't the person that said it first, but that's where I've remembered it. So, but yeah, I think that was kind of what I was thinking as well. That was kind of my takeaway from that. Like, we can get really caught up in our thoughts, and Aaron Tate, who was one of our previous seasons guests, actually put out a beautiful Substack around just like jumping in, like giving things a go, and do it, even when you're not confident at times, because that's where and his point was that's your opportunity to learn. That's your, that's where we learn most about ourselves
in the first place.
That's right. That's right. So and there's that beautiful quote from I think it was the founder of, I'm going to be pulled up, I can tell well and truly here from misquoting all these people. I'm sure it was the founder of LinkedIn. He said something along the lines of, if you're not embarrassed by the first iteration of your product, you've launched too late. And I think about that all the time. It's like, I just got to give things a go. And you would have been through this in your career where you've done something, you look back and you're like, did I do that?
Goodness.
Oh, I guess I did that.
And why? Every time I look at some of my old stuff, I don't know whether it'll ever get better. But what I loved about this too, about constructively delusional sort of attitudes, is that we know that there is, a type of optimism, learned optimism that we know from psychology, Martin Seligman, learned optimism. So there's a type of optimism we can learn, and it doesn't mean that we become biased in a positive way and we become delusional. Really, we know that we tend to be negatively biased, right, rather than being too optimistic. But if we pay attention to our successes and failures, and we make sure that we attribute the successes to something internal and stable, to our own skill set and effort and resilience and that sort of stuff, rather than to external attributes, we can learn to become more optimistic, and I guess that then enables us to take action more readily.
Yeah, and gives us confidence too, right, as well. And
Absolutely.
You highlighted a really good point here, and I think the way that I sometimes describe this in my conversations with clients is around, we don't want to be blindly optimistic.
No.
We don't want to go, I can achieve this, and there's no way of getting it. I mean, that's where hope theory starts to like come into play there too, right? And that's probably a conversation for another podcast episode, I'd say. But, you know, learned optimism is this beautiful thing that helps us reframe, you know, the situation that we're in here and now with a more positive lens. You know, it gives us the confidence to go ahead and work towards something that might stretch us and help us to grow. So, yeah, there's a beautiful takeaway there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is so important, I think, to drive home, because our brains collect evidence all the time, right? Our brains collect evidence all the time. And we know that we tend to be more negatively biased. That means that when we're successful, we are more likely to look for evidence as to why the success was based on something external to us or outside of our control. We need to make an effort to collect evidence that kind of speaks for us so we can actually become confident. I think, you know, that's just so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that negativity bias, you know, it's an interesting one. And you see it all the time. You ask people to, like, tell us what they don't like about a show, an event, a workshop, and they can pretty quickly rattle off a whole series of things. And then you flip it and you're like, oh, well, what were the positive things that you saw about that show, event, or workshop that you attended? And they struggle. It's a lot harder, the effort.
I know, but especially about ourselves. Ask someone about their weaknesses. They'll readily rattle down a list of 30.
Yes.
Ask them about their strengths, and they're struggling. It is the saddest thing in the world.
Indeed. Very, very challenging. Oh, gosh. Well, another fruitful conversation. And I feel as though the energy from the conversation with Leanne has just flowed into our little post show here as well. And hopefully our listeners have felt that as well. But thank you for a very insightful recap. I feel as though you've brought all the conversation to this one here, Micah.
Questions.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, you've prompted hopefully our audience members with lots of really good thoughts there. But I guess the big takeaway there: remain constructively delusional and see where it gets us.
Love it, Karen.
Yeah. All right. Well, until next time. Hope that everyone's enjoyed today's episode, and we can't wait for you to tune in to our next episode. We're pretty early in the season. We've got lots of amazing guests still to come, so stay tuned for plenty great more lessons. For further info, head to our website, flourishingunfiltered.com, and get in touch with us via our socials, @flourishingunfiltered.
Now, if you or someone you know is struggling with feelings of loneliness, low mental health, or suicidal thoughts, please know that there are people who care and treatments that can help. We've compiled some helplines for you in the show notes.
It's a wrap for Flourishing Unfiltered today. Please give us a follow and leave us a comment and a review. We hope you tune in next time.